that more people die from hyponatremia than from dehydration. More people die from too much water than from not enough.
Overhydration.
Mm-hmm.
What does that look like? Because you see people walking around in like a gallon of water, and if it doesn't have electrolytes, all you're doing is depleting your own electrolytes.
Let's not make it too complex. Get it in.
It's just really being able to dial back to understanding the signs that your body's telling you and be a little bit more in tune of your innate intelligence.
Shazam!
Haven't we talked about this yet? What do you think about urine? Some people like, if
Don't
it's
drink
clear,
urine.
you're overhydrated.
If you're drinking urine, it's bad. Okay. Shit's gone really south, and yeah, we're in straight up survival mode at that point.
We are not drinking urine here.
Yeah.
But should you look at your urine for color to kind of see where you are at? Welcome back to the 90% Healthy Podcast. Hey, Don, how's your week been?
Hey, Klaudia, I have had a great week. We had, we're in northern Indiana right now, and we had a front come through last night, and we had temperatures last night in the 50s. Today, they're in the 60s. So we are looking at fall, and, you know, college football's back, and the Buckeyes beat the Longhorns last Saturday. So it's been a good week.
I love that. Yeah, we actually got some monsoon rain yesterday here in Arizona, which was really nice, and finally going below triple digits.
Yeah.
Which is great.
You know,
But
my mom and dad had a place in Phoenix, and my dad always said he leaves Ohio on the first freeze, and he comes back from Arizona the first day it's over 100. So that was how they determined when they were in Ohio and when they were in Arizona.
Yeah, that's a very good strategy. And speaking of water, we are going to talk about water today.
Mm-hmm.
Not in the sense that weather, but in the sense that water inside of us and how we can make sure it has a balanced level of electrolytes so we can perform both physically and mentally in a way that is adequate and even optimal for us. So kick us off with a little bit about what people don't know about electrolytes. Because I think even for me, it's a learning curve, and most of us walk around chronically dehydrated. So I want us to understand why electrolytes are so important.
Well, electrolytes, so by definition, electrolytes are these small ions, cations, anions. They're either positive or negative charged elements that play a crucial role in all of your body's functions, whether it's enzymes or muscle contraction or anything. But they also play a very important role in regulating hydration, meaning that your body doesn't want you to dry out. Okay, water is critical for us. And when we start exercising and we start doing, or if we're caught in the heat, if I'm stuck out in Arizona in July and my car breaks down and I've got to walk a couple miles, it's rough, particularly if you're not acclimated to it. But these electrolytes are what controls whether I'm going to give water up, or when I take it in, what rate do I take it in? What rate is it accepted back into the body? And this is one of the challenges. And one of the other challenges is that the same way there is a huge continuum of who needs electrolytes and when and how. And we'll spend some time talking about this, but the products that are developed for an athlete doing, what is that race they do out there in Southern California, Arizona, Badlands or something like that? They race 110 miles in, across Death Valley, Okay. Hydration for that person, which is kind of the extreme, and hydration for Joe Bag of Donuts who doesn't exercise, who basically, sits around all day. It's a huge difference. And there's a lot of contrary information about consumption of electrolytes, primarily sodium chloride, salt. There's huge differential between the person who's very physically active and the person who's not. So you can't take one and just apply it to the other because the physiology is very different.
And we're not just talking about what I love that you mentioned that it's very different to the individual who's an athlete and also the individual who's just sitting at home stuffing their face with high processed foods. Because it's not just the fact that you're losing electrolytes as you're sweating, but if you're consuming a lot of high processed foods, you're throwing off the balance of sodium and potassium in your bloodstream, in your body, and really pushing your cellular behavior to a point where it's suboptimal.
Yeah, I have to tell you, I am far less concerned with overconsumption of sodium at any level than what I have been in the past. I'll tell you. And we need to get this guy on the podcast, Dr. James D. Nickley Antonio.
Yeah.
Dr. James, his books are excellent. If you are a consumer of this information, his Instagram feed or his social media feeds are fabulous. I mean, this
Yes.
guy does great work, and rightly so. He's an ex-wrestler, so he must be brilliant. But his
Not
work
biased
is
at all.
no, not at all. But when you take a look at it, listen, if I have too many electrolytes in my system, I urinate them out.
Yeah.
Okay. And there was information back in the late 60s, 70s, where they started to equate sodium balance with high blood pressure. That if you
Yeah.
had high blood pressure, you had too much blood plasma, and that was raising. Well, that probably was not the case. And
Yeah.
we're starting to see that was probably, and we had an entire movement about low sodium. And while food companies were taking we're taking these electrolytes out of the food, which, by the way, we have a receptor on our tongue for sodium chloride. Okay. Our body, that goes both ways. It's both a positive and a negative signal. There's times when you're really wrung out and you need to get some sodium in your body. You put some salt on your tongue and you like it. It feels good. And then there's other times, if you put salt on your tongue, it gives you a negative reaction. You're probably hydrated at that point, or you're certainly electrolyted up. So this is pretty interesting from that standpoint. But when you take all that sodium out of food, well, they balance the taste with a bunch of sugar,
Mhm.
which, by the way, you also have a receptor for on your tongue.
Yeah.
So this is one of the problems with this concept of ultra processed food, in the fact that you've pulled out a lot of things that you really need. And as I've been looking at this and preparing for this episode, what's been there, and we need to do an episode on just electrolytes and
Mhm.
and minerals, okay, and we'll do this coming up. Today we're talking about hydration primarily, but when you look at magnesium, another very important electrolyte, well, there's at least 8 different variations of magnesium. And as I've been doing some research on this, magnesium is not fungible moving from one ion to another, is that you kind of have to consume all 8. Now, what's that mean? Well, if you're getting your food from real food, if you're eating real spinach, if you're eating real vegetables, you're getting them, and you're eating, I think you probably need to eat some animal byproducts too, because there's a lot of good electrolytes that come there. You're getting the full range of those 8 magnesium types. But your ability to go just shoot down a magnesium supplement, a single variant magnesium supplement, if you're eating a lot of high processed food, it doesn't work. It doesn't get it. You've got it just, there's a term that we use called JERF, JERF, just eat real food.
Why have I not
And
heard of that?
hey, it's one of my little jewels. If you just eat real food, a lot of this takes care of itself, particularly if it's one thing to be highly processed in a factory. It's another thing to be big ag produced in the field. If
Yeah.
you can get food that is grown locally, this is where the value of organics come into play. And it doesn't have to be true organically grown, but if it's grown locally, if you have your own garden, the quality of that food is ridiculous. I think you and I have talked about the fact, when I grew up, we had 2 1-acre gardens at our house. And my dad was a connoisseur of tomatoes, particularly beefsteak tomatoes. These are great big tomatoes. And he made tomato sandwiches and BLTs. And I'll tell you, those tomatoes, you'd pick them up out of the garden, and it was like eating candy. It was so good, so tasty. I've never eaten a tomato from a store that
Yeah.
tasted like those tomatoes that we grew in our garden. Now, those
Yeah.
tomatoes we grew in our garden, okay, we cleaned our barns out, and those barns got spread onto the garden ground and got plowed under, and we had crazy nutrient rich food. It's
Doesn't that
Unless you're growing your own garden, that's hard to do.
Yeah, it's hardly the case nowadays. Most people are not getting their food from local farmers or let alone grow their own food. And I even know when I go back to Hungary, the fruits and the vegetables just taste different. The
Yes.
egg yolk is so nice and
It's
orange.
orange. Yeah, that's what I was going to say. And just so
Yes.
rich.
Yes, so much
Yeah.
more rich. So I definitely see that it's really difficult to get away with without supplementing with electrolytes, without having something that replenishes what you lose across the day. Because even if you're not sweating, you are urinating, you are breathing, so you
You're
are
always
losing
sweating.
electrolytes.
Well,
To any, yeah,
Claudia, you're always sweating. Now, it may not be
yeah,
visually to you. You know, I like to ride bicycles, and it's funny because we'll be in the summertime riding, and you won't feel sweat like if I'm in a sauna.
yeah,
But you finish up a ride and you get back and you've got these big white streaks on your jersey or on your bibs. That's sodium. That's sodium that's
mm,
come out while you've been sweating. So you're always putting out sweat because this is what controls the heat in the body. That's the big
yeah, yeah.
deal there is that you've got to be able to control that heat. If you get too hot, you get very ill. But yeah, sweating's part of that process.
And then I wanted to talk a little bit about also how it's not just the dehydration that could be an issue, but also overhydration.
Hmm.
What does that look like? Because you see people walking around in like gallon of water, and if it doesn't have electrolytes, all you're doing is depleting your own electrolytes and not
Well,
replenishing them.
you're getting ready to create a problem. That this is what's called hyponatremia is the
Mhm.
term for this. And if you want to learn more about this, there is a MD PhD down in South Africa. His name is Dr. Tim Noakes, and he is an absolute contrarian in the exercise and nutrition space. And was way ahead on ketogenic diets, way ahead. But he also wrote this really good book called Waterlogged. More people die. I think this stat comes from his book that more people die from hyponatremia than from dehydration. More people die from too much water than from not enough. And what happens is that if you're just guzzling water and you're number one, you're not sweating it, or number two, you don't have the electrolyte balance in there so it can cross the gut and get out of the stomach, creates all kinds of problems, not the least of which is your brain starts to swell. And
Mm.
that's eventually what kills you. There can be some kidney issues too. But yeah, but when you look at this, we tell people you got to stay hydrated, 8 glasses a day, and I don't want to minimize the importance of hydration, but I almost feel like we've gone too far. People walking around with their
Surprise.
water jugs all day. Yeah, surprise. um I think we probably pushed this a little too far. And I'll tell you, I see people who manage this well. They're drinking water, but they also have sodium in the water. And we've seen sodium-based supplements kind of take off lately. I mean, in the last 3 to 5 years, Rob Wolf's product, LMNT, great, great electrolyte supplement. Well, we've seen a lot of people come in behind that, and it makes sense to me. Makes a lot of sense to me because part of the challenge is getting that water out of the stomach and out of the gut into the blood plasma, and you can't do that unless there's electrolytes with it,
Mm.
because the blood has what we call an osmolality. This is the amount of solute of it's the amount of sodium in the blood, and the body maintains this very closely using two hormones. One's called aldosterone, the other one's called antidiuretic hormone, and this really controls this because your blood doesn't want to be too thin, and the body controls that. So as we stuff a bunch of water into our gut and we don't have the necessary sodium particularly, but there will be also potassium, magnesium in there too, chloride as well. If you don't have it, won't get out of the gut, and this is what causes all the problems. So just kind of pounding water is not the answer. And then to complicate it even more, there's a huge variation person to person. This idea
Mm.
that I can say, oh, 8 glasses of water for everybody it's just way too simple. Listen, I'm a 270 pound, 6 foot human. I'm thick. Okay. I'll tell you what was interesting. So, I've done a lot of work with wrestlers, and with wrestlers, we cut weight, and hopefully you're only cutting water weight 24 hours before your weigh-in. But sometimes they'll cut it a little longer than that, which is when it becomes a problem. That's when all of a sudden aldosterone and antidiuretic hormones start to kick in and cause all kinds of issues. But if you keep it short, but if you cut that water weight too long, you've got no energy when the event comes up. So you got to get that stuff pulled back in. So your behaviors as it relates to heat loss and managing heat drive a lot of this, and it's a very individual variable.
And as I was looking at some research on this, it was interesting because I wanted to understand, and we talked a little bit about this before we hit record. In terms of when you are losing too much electrolytes, too much water, as you mentioned, your blood becomes thicker and your body doesn't want that. You want to, what the body does, it pulls water out of your cells because we have extracellular water and intracellular water. So it pulls water out of your cells, which then in turn will manifest as headaches, dizziness, feeling
You don't want to
confused,
do
lack
that.
of
Yeah, that's a
energy. You
bad
don't
thing.
want that. You don't want don't want to dehydrate your cells. So it makes sense to me now that when they say when you're as much as 2% dehydrated, you start to have loss in memory, loss in mental focus and concentration because your body is compensating for that loss of water, pulling it out of your cells that need H2O in order to optimally function. So that was just like a little bit of a what? Makes sense now. And the
Sure.
electrolytes are so important here.
Yeah, this is absolutely the case, and we have different levels of electrolytes that help maintain this, meaning that sodium. And when you take in salt, you take in sodium chloride. That's what salt is. The sodium plays an important role in controlling plasma volume. When you start pulling water out of the cell, that's mediated by potassium. So we have another electrolyte that starts to kick in at that point. So typically when you see supplementation of electrolytes, you see sodium, magnesium, and potassium in
Yes.
those supplements. I want to correct something you said, and it's not a correction, but
Yeah,
the
please.
the blood doesn't get thick. The blood
Okay.
stays the same.
Okay.
Okay. The problem is the question, how is it shifting water either out of the gut, into the gut, out of the cells, into the cells? How is it maintaining it? Because it wants that osmolality nailed down. It is not variable. Now, one of the cool things about this in the day and age that we live, Klaudia, literally, I was working on this with a company that made a hydration product back in 2016, 2015, 2016. And it was hard to do hydration studies. It had to be done kind of in a college
Yes.
laboratory setting, and it was hard to do. We now have some pretty cool tech emerging that I can do. I can measure it on my tongue. I have a device that I came across this device the other day that you can hook to the strap of your heart rate transmitter, and it's measuring hydration while you're exercising. And just a new addition. I've not used it yet, but we're starting to see the emergence of some pretty cool tech to help us better understand what our hydration levels are and what we need to do to fix that. So my screen is moving because the washing machine in the rig is rinsing. Okay. And it shakes the
Okay.
whole rig.
So it's
So
not
that's
an
the reason
earthquake?
no, it's not an earthquake. It's the washing machine in the RV.
Oh,
So that's
that's
why that
funny.
moves. I'm trying to stabilize it, but it goes on and off, and I
That's okay. I
apologize for
hardly
that.
noticed it.
Okay.
But that's very interesting because you and I always talk about we want to track our baseline, our state as much as we can, and hydration has been something that hasn't been fully developed to be accurate clinical data to a point where I've heard about sweat patches that
Yeah.
were starting to come out, but then they didn't seem to take off. So it would be interesting to understand because then you would know what you need to replenish,
Yeah,
what you
pretty
need to
high
do.
hassle factor with a sweat patch. Put that patch
Mm.
on. You got to have a lab person there. You peel the patch off. It goes into a tube. The top goes on the tube. Then it goes back to a lab for analysis. Okay.
Hmm.
So, like I said, it's got a kind of a high hassle factor, and it's not something that you can kind of self track. But again, we're
Yeah.
starting to see this. And Claudia, I listened to this podcast that's called Moonshots, Peter Diamandis, and they talk a lot about AI and they talk a lot about futurism and things like that. And they made a statement the other day that between 2025 and 2035, we're going to see as much development in that time as we saw from 1925 to 2025. It's 10
Yeah.
times the rate. And
Yeah.
what a cool time to be alive that we can
Yeah.
be there to see that and pay attention to this. But I do think self actualization, self measurement is getting better all the time. I fully expect, whether it's going to be an Apple Watch or another device, I fully expect to see this technology integrated into a wearable device. I'm looking forward any day. I mean, the fact that I can hang a hydration device on my heart rate transmitter, it's really close. Integrating that to the next
Yeah.
level is not a huge step.
And we talked a little bit about off record previously, and I want to dive into that because you mentioned that dehydration can also trigger a sympathetic response in the body,
Yes.
which obviously shows up in our heart rate variability.
Yes.
So there is a way to track or at least kind of quantify dehydration or your level, not directly but indirectly through HRV. Obviously, there are a lot of other things that impact HRV, so it's obviously not a direct correlation. But so it does show up in our HRV when we have issues with hydration.
When we're chronically dehydrated, that's clearly a sympathetic signal. The body's saying to the mind, hey, go find water. Okay. The same way hunger says, go find food. These are sympathetic drivers. So yes, the data on this is very clear that dehydration will drive a sympathetic effect. And if you're someone with a chronically low HRV, I'm not saying hydration fixes it, but it may be part of the solution. There's so many factors that go into HRV, cardiovascular fitness, hydration, sleep, trauma. There's all these things that go into this, but you can meditate a lot, but if you're dehydrated, it won't fix it.
And we talked about sodium and potassium, and then you touched on magnesium too. And I wanted to talk a little bit about magnesiums in addition to what we kind of alluded to. I have heard many different numbers from like 300, 500. I'm just going to say hundreds of processes in the body are linked to magnesium and its different forms in order to function at an optimal level. Now, because of the nutrient deficiency in our diet, magnesium is something that I personally supplement with on a daily basis. And I know that athletes or high performers tend to gravitate toward magnesium because of the recovery aspect of what does muscle health and just physical performance in your experience have to do with electrolytes and magnesium per se or potassium?
I'll tell you, I'm learning about this too right now. And I reached out to a friend of mine, Dr. Eric Serrano, and I said, because my question was, I use a product when I go to bed at night called Calm, which has magnesium citrate in it. And I was under the impression that if you're getting magnesium in any form, it's fungible. It'll move based on where it needs. Well, Eric sent me back an interesting graphic that basically says, no, it's not fungible. And on this graphic, I just pulled it up. There's 13 different types of magnesium ions that play different roles. They may be bound to lactate, picolinate, carbonate, literally threonate, potassium chloride, potassium salt, magnesium sulfate, magnesium toluene, magnesium citrate, magnesium malate, magnesium oxide. Again, we could do 10 episodes on magnesium.
Gosh, yeah.
But recognize the fact that magnesium's very important. Magnesium glycate plays an important role in muscle relaxation. It might be fun to do an episode on muscle contraction, how ATP and cross bridges and just the way the whole muscle contracts, that whole process. It's an amazing process. An amazing process. I think when I was teaching exercise phys, I think we spent about a week's worth of lectures just on that muscle contraction process and just all the things that go into it. And again, the body is such an amazing, we have 30 trillion cells. Those cells vary to the point that we have thousands of mitochondria in each one of those cells producing energy. The numbers are just mind-boggling.
Yeah.
And then you have these electrolytes. We have these different minerals that are playing a critical role depending on whether they're crossing into the muscle cell, across the brain, blood-brain barrier. It's a rather interesting and somewhat overwhelming process. And again, the challenge is, let's go back to the first thing we talked about. I think it's really hard to supplement all the different forms of magnesium, potassium, sodium. Okay. But if you just eat real food, they're there. The better job you can do of eating real food. And, one of the things when I was teaching nutrition in the last couple of years, I taught nutrition. One of the things I told my class, I said, listen, if there's a nutrition label on the package, it's probably a bad choice.
Yeah.
Try to buy things that don't have nutrition labels, like fresh fruits and vegetables and meats and so forth. That stuff around the outside of the grocery store, that's where you get your best qualities. But by the time you're reading nutrition levels, you're probably behind. You're probably behind at that point. So going back to answer the question, yes, magnesium's critical, potassium's critical, sodium's critical. These are all very important electrolytes that, again, with sodium, potassium really manifesting itself in a dehydrated state that you can't solve by guzzling a gallon of water.
Yes. But I do have to give a plug for Bioptimizers because I do love their magnesium. They have
Yes,
7 forms in their pill form and in the pill version, and they have 8 forms of magnesium in their powder. So I do have to give
would
them
you
credit.
contact them and see if we can't get a little bit of a kickback on this since we're talking? No, I love Biooptimizers too. They're a great company. Love those guys. I've been on their podcast a couple times.
Yeah, they're
Um,
great.
they're super. It's a
Yeah.
great
One of my
supplement
favorite
company.
supplement
Yeah.
brands.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
So yeah, that, and they have a great magnesium supplement. I think there's eight types of magnesium in
So
that product.
7 forms in the pill and then 8 forms in their new powder version.
Okay.
So
Good.
they were one of the first in my world, and when I've started to look into it, put multiple forms in one supplement.
Right.
So yeah.
No, they do a
Yeah.
great job.
They do. Okay, let's see. What else have we not talked about in terms of hydration and electrolytes? Also, I love that we're talking about this because there was a period, now it's starting to dissipate, but much like with our dietary world, we're shaming fat. There is a time where we're shaming salt. Like, you can't eat a lot of salt. Like, there's like a demonizing salt. And now, thanks to, of course, James Di Nicolantonio, who's also made salt to be our friend, it is becoming a lot more well understood that salt isn't the enemy here,
No.
which
No,
makes
and
me
it's,
feel very happy because I love salt.
well, Klaudia, look at you. You're an athlete. You're going hard all the time. You're always working out. You're always driving. You live in a hot climate. I don't know if you were quite as much a lover of salt when you were in Hungary as you are and you living in Arizona, but I got to believe the environment changes a little bit.
Yeah.
But yes, you're a classic person who's that receptor I talked about on the tongue. It's going to bring me some salt. Yeah, and it's going to make things taste better, because you're dehydrating all the time. You're constantly
Yeah.
losing water because of the heat.
Yeah,
So
especially if
so
I do
yeah.
sauna. Even
Oh,
yesterday, I was sitting in the sauna for 25 minutes and I was slowly sipping on, especially toward the end, on electrolyte water because I want to make sure my body rebalances that loss of electrolytes in the
and
cells.
as a rule of thumb, it's once you start to get a handle on this, it's more important to pre-hydrate
Oh,
than
that's a
to
good question. I wanted to ask that. Yes.
hydrate, especially during an event, because when you're in an event, particularly aldosterone is going to slow stomach emptying, and
Mhm.
your body is your body's thinking about output, not input. Okay. And it's more difficult to hydrate during the event. So that's again when someone is not world-class runner, and they're at the back of the pack and they stop at every water stop. This is where the hyponatremia becomes a problem. It's that
Mhm.
back of the pack runner that you got to keep an eye on. But yes, so
So,
pre-hydrating is really important, particularly for athletic performance.
okay. And then how about post hydrating? Should you
Sure.
hydrate the same way with electrolytes pre and post?
I don't know why not. I don't know why
Can
not.
you
And
overdo electrolytes?
I don't think so. This is what I picked up from D. Nicoli Antonio is the fact that, listen, when
Uh-huh.
my sodium levels get so high that's a problem, you urinate them.
You pee it out.
Yeah, you urinate it out. So now, and again, that tongue is going to be an important mediator here. Listen, if you're drinking a electrolyte supplemented drink and it still tastes good, well, it tells you something. Now, some of these electrolytes,
Yes,
you know,
let's get into it because not everything is great, even if
there's
it's all over television.
well, especially going into the fall and all the things that are going on
Yes.
with fall football. There University of Florida, hot place, limited, and again, in the 60s, limited air conditioning. Okay. You're not supposed to live in Florida if there's not air conditioning in the summertime. You're just not
Yeah,
supposed to
that's
live
not
there
good.
unless you're an
No.
alligator or a snake. And there's still a lot of alligators and snakes there. But yeah, you get a football team, and there's a big difference between trying to keep a team in Florida hydrated and a team in Minnesota hydrated. The temperature is just ridiculous. So they did some really cool work there. They found out that they could create an electrolyte drink, and it got called Gatorade. This story it's again, if you read Waterlogged, the story is very well told. Well, you know, Quaker Oats saw this. Oh, this is an interesting product. They bring this up to Chicago, where their headquarters are, and some marketing person drank that and said, "There's no way we can sell this. No one will drink this." Again, because it was not sweet. Well, they dump a bunch of
Mhm.
sugar into this and so forth. And again, when you go pull a sports drink out of the cooler at your local gas station, whether you're pulling the sports drink out or whether you're pulling a cola out, a sugar sweetened cola, it's the same thing. One has a little bit more electrolyte in it, but ironically, you and I were talking about this beforehand. When you have very high level athletes, the Tour de France riders,
Yeah.
if you ever watch the Tour de France, particularly in the climbing stages, the big mountain stages, you'll see this red motorcycle that is out there driving with the lead pack, and their saddlebags are loaded with flat sugared Coke. Pro cyclists, elite cyclists love caffeine and sugar and hydration. For them, it's the perfect combination. But these guys
For
are
a quick
riding their
Yes, for a quick energy, this is what you need.
Well, yeah, and they're riding their bikes for 5 hours. They're burning 7,000, 8,000 calories. That's 120 to 150 pound person is burning that many calories. I used to burn that amount of calories back when I was training, but I was a 290 pound person. I was twice as big as they were. Yeah. And so flat Coke is a wonderful tool if you're a pro cyclist. For the rest of us, and it doesn't make really, when it comes right down to it, whether it's high fructose corn syrup or cane sugar, it doesn't make a difference. You got to get liquid sugar out of your diet. Period. End of story. I mean, we just consume way too much. And oh, by the way, we start to interfere with electrolyte percentages, all these things. These become a problem with this. So, how the choices that you make from the ultra processed world, and soda drinks would be by definition ultra processed. You got to be really careful.
Because, yeah, this is my understanding that the reason why we're looking at even like hypertension with ultra processed foods, it's not the sodium, it's
It's
the
the
sugar.
sugar. Yeah, it's the highly processed carbohydrates. Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah.
And again, back in the 60s and 70s, Ansel Keys was a researcher up at the University of Minnesota, kind of the father of low-fat diets. And when you look at his research, Gary Taubes wrote a really good book on this. It's called Good Calories, Bad Calories. I love this book. In fact, I used to use it in one of my classes. One of my advanced exercise science classes, you couldn't get an A in the class unless you read that book and did a presentation on it. You could ace all the tests, but if you wanted an A, you had to read that book and do a presentation on it. That's how important I thought it was. And it's excellent. He does the history. Gary Taubes is an excellent writer, and his books are outstanding. But he does a nice job of laying this out, the role of Ansel Keys and Hubert Humphrey, a senator from Minnesota, and then the president, the vice president. I think he wanted to be vice president, but just all the politics that went into this. And Ansel Keys was doing fat studies on rabbits that were eating high-fat diets. Okay, I don't know how many rabbits you've ever had in your life, but rabbits do not eat high-fat diets. No, they eat grass. Yeah, they eat green things.
I see rabbits here walking around all the time. They're not munching on freaking fat.
I
they're munching on
freaking
the
love
grass.
bunnies. I've had bunnies for pets my whole life. I love bunnies.
Seriously.
So yeah, this is the important thing. But if you want to get some history on that, like I said, Good Calories, Bad Calories from Gary Taubes, excellent.
So many good snippets. I also want to go into a little bit more on a few telltale signs when it comes to either underhydration or overhydration, because people can miss these signs. I mean, I do believe 100% that our body is constantly giving us signs in terms of what it needs, what it has too much of. We just forgot how to listen to it. We're distracted with all the other advice that's coming from our external world, hoping that whatever the next person says is going to be what we need. But our body is constantly telling us, I need more water, I need more sodium, I need more X, XYZ. So what are some of the signs in your experience that are underhydration and also overhydration?
Well, from underhydration, we have this very evolved signal that our body sends us. We call it thirst. Okay, that's what.
I thought you were going to say something like, "Wow!" Like,
no.
Guess what? When you're underhydrated, you get thirsty.
It's thirst. Okay, if you're not thirsty, you're not underhydrated. Okay, and again, this has gotten pushed for quite a while that you need more water, and you know, I'm not a conspiracy theory guy. I just don't go there. But I also understand the role of bureaucracies and big companies. And if I'm trying to sell more of a sports drink, I'm going to tell you that you should drink ahead of thirst. I don't think that's the case anymore. I believe there's a lot of evidence to suggest that's not the case. Now, you have to make your own decision. You have to make your own research. But I think you have to drink to thirst. Now, you have to pay attention to the electrolytes when you're taking it, when you are drinking. What are you consuming? You know, this is one of the hot things right now about coconut water. You know, everyone's like, oh, you know, the hot thing is coconut. Well, it's got a ton of electrolytes in it. You know, that's what it does. I think it's wretched. I do not like coconut water.
I don't like coconut
water. And if I had to drink that, I would probably dehydrate.
But I did try one time, actually, when they opened the coconut and then I drank the coconut water out of that. That was great. And then it was really interesting because I'm like, you will not ever see me go to a grocery store and buy coconut water to quench my thirst. I just don't like what it tastes like. But that
some people do.
Actual thing tasted great. Yeah, some people do. My mom loves it.
And if you open that coconut, pour a little of the coconut water out, put a little rum in that, and then drink that, that is a wonderful. So no.
And that you will dehydrate. Yeah, because I also want to talk about some of the things that dehydrate us, and alcohol is one of them.
Yeah, absolutely. That when listen, the headache that you get from consuming too much alcohol and your hangover is from dehydration. Okay, that's where it comes. That's what happens. It's trying to metabolize that alcohol, and again, listen. When you used to, I don't drink anymore. I stopped drinking when I started working in the cannabis business, and if I feel like modifying my feelings or modifying it, I'll use a little cannabis to do that, because it'll make me feel better and I'll feel fine for the rest. I'll wake up feeling good. But listen, back in the day, we pounded a lot of alcohol. We went hard, and you always knew. By the way, my remedy was a flat Coke. Okay, that's what was next. That was on my bedstand. Throw in a couple of aspirin. I mean, so was it healthy? No. First of all, consuming the amount of alcohol we consumed. No. Well, the biohack approval stopped at like the third drink, and we went hard way beyond that. The third drink happened as we were pre-gaming.
Yeah.
but yeah, but that headache comes from dehydration. So you got to get that
Yeah.
in there. And again, the same rules apply there. Everybody talks about caffeine and coffee stripping water out. I don't know that it's as big an issue. I think there probably is some water stripping that takes place from that. And, so go ahead and consume your,
Yeah.
rehydrate on top of that. It's not a bad idea.
They often say hydrate before you caffeinate this, which I do agree with. I mean, it's a slight diuretic. You are going to, I mean, I personally do tend to go to the bathroom after I drink coffee a lot more frequently. So for me, hydration is just very important. And also, I wanted to mention with the underhydration, a lot of us think we're hungry when we really are just thirsty.
Hmm. I don't think I have a comment on that. I'm still stuck on the fact that we started a podcast and we're commenting on how often Klaudia pees. Didn't have that on my bingo card. But yeah, I'm not sure there. Not sure
I
there.
think because I personally, I mean, it comes from a little bit of personal experience too, and I've heard it over and over again that a lot of people, like, especially those who are prone to snacking,
Hmm.
when you're snacking a lot, obviously you're consuming a lot of ultra processed foods, more likely than not,
Right.
which will eventually make you more thirsty. But
My coffee.
looks nice. I gotta get another one in. But yeah, so it happened to me too, where I had to stop for a second when I would snack back in the day a lot more frequently, where I'm like, okay, let me just have a glass of water and see if my cravings will go away. And more
Yeah.
often than not, they do.
I just had a thought. And so again, I've done a lot of work in the cycling community. Back,
Yeah.
when I was a wrestler back in the early 80s, I had my third knee surgery by my third year of college. I had 5 and 5 is what I had. So by my third year, after my third knee surgery, I'm like, okay, I got to quit running. I'm 280 pounds. I can squat 840 pounds. I'm doing, I'm putting a lot of
That's nice.
force. And you take that and you go pound that for 5 miles on a hard sidewalk, and my knees hurt. So I quit running. Still sprinted, but stopped doing
Hmm.
distance running, started riding bicycles. And when I finished up my 5th year, my wrestling career, I basically, I was 3 years away from Olympic trials. There was not MMA wasn't a thing yet. I had the best wrestler in the history of USA wrestling in my weight class. And I'm like, and I had a full ride scholarship, academic scholarship to grad school. And I'm like, okay, we're done. So I poured myself into bicycling. And in fact, I was on a phone call yesterday with one of my roommates back then, who was a very good cyclist, Cat 1 pro cyclist, and he really shepherded me through a lot of this learning. Pro cyclists drink coffee like it's water. And we would do this race series. We had this one Italian sprinter, Roberto Gaggioli. Roberto was doing coffee enemas before the race.
Hmm.
Okay. Now, if coffee is a dehydrator, boy, it didn't show up in his game. Okay.
It's
This
different
guy,
when it goes in the other direction. It has a different effect, I
it
think.
shouldn't. It shouldn't. It shouldn't. I mean, once it hits the bloodstream, that's when, things are happening. But so I think it's a mistake to get hung up on that, first of all. Just because, and Klaudia, I drink coffee all day. I'll drink 2 liters of coffee a day, but the
Yeah.
majority of it is decaffeinated. Okay.
Yes, I
I
remember you said that.
I
Yeah.
can go for weeks without drinking caffeine. If we're not on the road, like if I'm driving, if we're out on the road, well, caffeine, I drink a lot of it. I mean, it's what keeps me going. Laura and I were just
Yeah.
talking about heading back west in November, late October, early November, and she's probably going to go down to her dad's for a week, and I'm going to drive us back to either Sedona or Lake Tahoe. My wife does not like to travel for more than 5 hours a day. And I get it. She doesn't like it.
Okay.
If it's me and the dog, it's 10 to 13 hours. Okay. And I'm hammering. And so I'll get from here to Lake Tahoe in 3 days. If she's with me, it takes 6 days. I will be guzzling caffeine on that. Okay.
Hmm.
And my HRV will be junk by the time
I
I
bet.
arrive. But that's,
Yeah.
that's why you work to build it up. So you have the capacity to use it and use the resiliency that you build up.
Yes, what we are here for,
Yeah,
to build
no
people
doubt.
resilience.
There you go.
Definitely. So true. Okay, a couple of things as you were talking just came to my mind. First of all, I absolutely love this is going to be completely unrelated to what we talked about, but you mentioned that you talked to your roommate.
Yeah.
I absolutely love that you have such great and strong relationships with people in your, past college life, students. You keep in touch with people and you get on the phone. I don't think a lot of people do that.
Hmm.
Like it's just
They don't have relationships. That's too bad.
it's not necessarily relationships that maintaining relationships that go back so far. And
Uh,
especially when you're living in different parts of the country. Like maybe my generation is just maybe just terrible at it.
I think we talked about it on another a couple months ago. I went back to my 45th high school reunion,
Yes.
mainly to see one person. Really, when it comes right down to it, I have one of my best friends from high school, Kelly Bell. I wanted to see Kelly because I haven't seen, he anyway. And yeah, not only did I get to see Kelly, but I got to see a bunch of my classmates that I have not seen in 45 years. Oh my God. One of them, Dee Costello, comes up to me and says, man, I got to tell you, my grandson's wrestling now. And I'm thinking, fuck, I'm not that old, am I? I'm like, well, I'm glad for your grandson. I'm kind of bumming on the statement right now.
Yes.
But
That's funny.
but yeah, it's and I don't know what does it. I have this huge desire. Now we're going to Laura's 45th class reunion next weekend. Um, and she's going to get to see a bunch of her friends and she's excited about it. Maybe that's why we get along so well. But I love, I had a teammate, Danny George at Ohio State, and we'd be sitting around telling war stories, and Danny says, "Yeah, we're just riding the rainbow." And when I get to go back to wrestling matches or alumni matches or things like that, oh, there's a lot of riding the rainbow that takes place and storytelling. And the stories probably get bigger and they probably get a little bit foggy and more, more advanced, but that's okay. Um, but yeah,
That's funny.
that is the best part of life, I think.
Yeah, I agree. Totally agree. Very cool. Okay, the other thing I wanted to ask, you mentioned that, you drink a lot of coffee, but just in general, but you also obviously drink electrolytes. I don't want to plug any brand or it's not about that, but
Hmm.
I am curious genuinely, like how frequently do you drink electrolytes or an
Daily,
electrolyte drink?
daily.
And daily, is it once a day or when you train, is it maybe twice a day?
No, it's
Like
usually once a
what does it
day.
look like for you?
It's usually once a day. It's usually maybe 1 to 2 grams. Now,
Is it like
I'm
a
not
packet you
training.
pour into water?
We use Redlands Red Lights. It's a scoop, so it's a
Oh, okay.
it's a 1 gram scoop, and put that in a drink. Laura does it more than I do. She uses a lot more than I do. Again, I'm kind of let's just get real food, and you get a lot of it that way too.
And also, a lot of people like you should have electrolytes first thing in the morning because I know we lose water, we lose stuff as we sleep. So, what is your take on that? Is it something we should do first thing in the morning, or is this something that we should do closer to if it's a training day
Let's not
around
make it
training?
too complex. Get
I
it in.
know.
Okay.
Yeah.
What works for you? Okay.
Yeah.
I think you know what? Listen, you and I had this conversation a couple days ago. You went to an event where the audience was largely just real people. Okay,
Yes.
not biohacker types or athletic types or things
Yes.
like that. And and we don't want to listen, we do know a lot of the things that we recommend can benefit that community. They hear it and they like it, but we don't want to overcomplicate it.
You're right. Yeah.
Get the bottle, create it, and figure out what works for you. Nicotinamide riboside, NR, which is a precursor to NMN, which is a precursor to NAD, which is really important in what we call electron transport, energy
Mhm.
production. And I was listening to a podcast, a really good podcast with one of the Dr. Charles Tipton from the University of Iowa, the guy who developed NR. And this is where it's at. And they were talking about the consumption of NR in the morning and at night on the diurnal cycle process. And I thought to myself, it's got to go through my mouth, into my gut, across my gut, to my liver, into the bloodstream, across the cellular wall, into the mitochondrial wall. I've got a feeling that takes longer than whether I take it in the morning or night.
Mhm.
I think so many times with supplements, just get it in. Okay. Fix the deficiency.
Yeah.
Okay. Get that in. We're so used to living in a drug culture where the drug culture is a very small molecule that hangs on a receptor and has a very quick response. Okay. So all of a sudden timing becomes very important. BID, TID, um, we're talking about food here.
Yeah.
Should I eat my steak in the morning or at night? Should I eat my, just get it in. Okay.
Yeah.
Figure out what works for you. And again, if this is something you're struggling with, work with a pro. There's great dietetics, there's naturopathic doctors, there's lots of really good people out there that can help you grow into this to understand it. But at the end of the day, it's just get it in. And when's the best time to exercise? When you can fucking exercise, get it in,
Yeah.
just get it in.
I'm titling this episode, Just Get It In.
Just get it in.
Okay, before we get to a couple of more tips than just get it in, I
Yeah.
do want to touch on the overhydration aspect of it. What does
Yeah.
it look like? How do I know if I'm overhydrated? What
It's
does my
hard to
body
tell.
tell me?
It's hard to tell. Okay. That people who struggle with hyponatremia, they don't know it until they start to get foggy, lightheaded, and then is it because of the exercise or whatever? It's hard to tell.
Yeah.
And honestly, I don't know. I don't have a good set of signs to tell you. I guess what I'm saying is that waterlogging yourself is not the answer. Getting the amount of water in that you need is the answer, and let thirst. This is the thing. Again, when you listen to the Tim Noakes on this, and I love this guy. He's an absolute contrarian. Sued by the South African nutritional group based on his work on ketogenic diets and so forth. I mean, he is a real contrarian to the big organized groups, and I'm okay with that. I kind of like that. But
What do you think
let
about
thirst tell you.
urine? Some people if
Don't
it's
drink
clear
urine.
you're overhydrated.
If you're drinking urine, it's bad. Okay. Shit's gone really south, and yeah, we're in straight up survival mode at that point.
We are not drinking urine here.
Yeah.
But should you look at your urine for color to kind of see where you are at?
I think that makes a lot of sense, but I also think it's kind of like measuring sunset with your hands. Oh, a sunset, and I like that.
Oh,
There's a
yes,
beer.
when you're like 1 hour, 2
Yeah,
hours.
yeah. Okay, it's a
Yes.
watch is much better.
Funny.
So this is when your urine becomes very concentrated and very dark, it's probably a good idea to drink more. That's it makes a lot of sense. So I don't have a problem with that.
Okay.
But thirst and getting in touch with this and making sure you have the other things is so important to do.
Yeah. So it's just really being able to dial back to understanding the signs that your body's telling you and be a little bit more in tune of your innate intelligence.
Shazam.
Have we talked about this yet?
Get in touch with your body. Yes, this is a good thing.
Yeah.
And you and I have a unique background from our activities. You as a dancer, me as an athlete, where we paid really close. I mean, we kind of really got in tune with our bodies back then. Now we're starting to use some technology, and we can use technology to we've learned about HRV. Again, I go back to the classic explanation of alcohol and recovery. When I was working with my wrestling team, 15 through 18, I did a presentation to them, and we did a study with a couple of the wrestlers, and I wired them up, and they drank 4 beers before they went to bed. When you look at their HRV, the effect of the 4 beers essentially cut the value of sleep in half. 8 hours of sleep yielded 4 hours of recovery. And that's just 4 beers. Klaudia, like I said, 4 beers for us was pregame. Okay, it was just getting going. And then we would go to practice, and we had 6 a.m. practices a few times, and I showed up at a few of them, and I'm sure you could smell the alcohol detoxing off me, and I'm sure I was probably would have blown a drunk breathalyzer. but I was a good enough athlete that I could get through the practice. And I always thought, well, if I can get through, I must be okay. Listen, today I have a
You,
whole, now that I have technology that I can measure, I have a whole new mindset on this. And I would have
and
done it
not
differently.
and not only that, I mean, your body rebounces a lot faster at that age than what it is now. I mean, even in my generation, I can't say that I wasn't drinking. I had like Wednesday was ladies' night, Thursday was $10 all you can drink in college, and then from then on, Friday to Saturday was just like, let's go.
It's
So,
ladies' night and the
right?
feeling's right.
Ladies
And
drink
it's
free
ladies' night. Yes. All
during
right.
ladies' night. It was very much we were incentivized to just go
Trust
ham.
me, the guys all know that.
Oh, yeah. It's like not I can't do that now. Like I now my body is just not liking it. And which obviously the data helps me understand, like, and it's consciously it's not a decision I want to make. It's just not.
Right.
It's not about the ROI, it's not about me not. I have a wonderful time sober. Super.
I have a graphic that I use where I talk about behaviors, culture, and decisions.
Yeah.
Decisions lead to behaviors. Behaviors leads to culture. Culture tends to drive decisions. But if you want to, so listen, when I went to school, we had Thursday night team meetings. Our assistant coaches showed up at the bar. Okay. And it was aggressive. And that was the culture. So we made that decision, which led to the behaviors. If you
Yeah.
want to interrupt that cycle, you plug data in. Okay.
Yeah.
When you see data, data can counteract culture, help make a better decision, which leads to new behaviors, which changes culture. Okay, that's the cycle. And that's what we're talking about right now. When we're looking at just living, we have a culture that's based on moving towards ultra processed fast food and away from self curated, farm to table kind of decisions. If you want to change that, you get data, which leads to new decisions, which leads to new behaviors, which creates a new culture.
I'll give you an example recently. I don't think I talked about it just yet, but recently I did a bit of a experiment wearing a CGM and eating all
Mm.
my meals from Dunkin' Donuts, measuring. It wasn't just donuts. The goal was to hit 100 grams of protein.
Okay.
And what it took, I had breakfast, snack, lunch, snack, dinner. And overall, I ate about 2,300 calories, which is more than I usually do. But I
Yeah,
needed to
I
reach the
expected a
protein.
much higher number than that.
So ideally, I tried to keep it as regular to my daily calories as possible, as much as possible, but I needed to reach 100 grams of protein, which is generally still not even 1.1 gram
Right.
per body weight protein. So I was starving all day. I was so hungry as much as my
Mm.
blood sugar was constantly yo-yoing up and down. My mood was just like, and the donut tasted great, but it also was just one of those things where data does change behavior. It wasn't only that I was hungry despite the 2,300 calories I ate that day, but it was empty calories. It was the
Hmm.
ultra processed nature of the food that I ate, the lack of nutrients, as much as it was calorie filled, it was nutrient deficient. So, I mean, without data, I could still feel suboptimal and not energized and nourished. But with the data of seeing how my blood sugar didn't even get a chance to go down and I was already eating my next meal that pushed it right back up, it just showed me that, and we know when we have high blood sugar, we have insulin coming in. When you have insulin in your bloodstream, you're not losing fat and you're storing energy. So it was just very, very interesting to see how if somebody is relying on ultra processed or just even fast food chains to get their meals in, even if it's not the sweets, but they have like the sourdough egg sandwich. So
Oh,
it was not terrible, but I haven't had that many bacon in a year that I had that day. Like everything had bacon in it. I had bacon as a snack that had maple something on it. So it was like sweet bacon. It was like a little strange, but needed the
oh,
protein. But it was really
you're
high
you're
fat.
just teasing me right now. Okay, because I got bacon in my brain right now. I get it. I get it. It's,
So it was very
and again,
interesting. So I see.
so
Yeah.
data helps. And you know what? We hope. Listen, we're pretty sure the person that's drawn to this podcast is someone that's probably already biohacking or doing these things and refining the process. We hope it gets to. I got a note from my uncle, 82-year-old uncle, yesterday that I have a cousin who is in Denver and is into yoga and fitness and a lot of the same, in our same community, and she turned him on to Rhonda Patrick.
Hmm.
Um, and he said, "Have you seen this?" And it was about creatine.
Yeah.
And I said, and I don't know what it takes. Listen, my uncle's 83. I wish he was tuned into this when he was 63 or 53. But yeah, we hope we can get this across the line. And I'll tell you, Claudia, there's a lot of work to do, from the standpoint. Go shopping at Walmart sometime. Um,
Yeah.
and just observe. Laura came home yesterday and she was telling me about someone that she works with, and her husband is always ill and he's always in the emergency room and these challenges. And he had come and done shopping, and everything was ultra processed and
Mm.
low sugar, a lot of sugar alcohols because he's diabetic. Zero awareness.
Yeah.
Zero. Um, and they think we can just give yourself a shot of insulin and make it work, and every
Yeah.
time you it does not work that way.
Yeah, that's when sometimes I say that a lot of the people in today's society are just feeling fine. And I describe that fine as an acronym for frustrated, frustrated that nothing's really working that they're doing.
Mm,
I as ignorant,
mm,
not really knowing, and it's not because it's their fault, but it's the confusion that is in the industry, and it's just hard to pay attention to everything, so they rather ignore. N is needy. The
mm,
next thing is gonna fix it. The next thing, I just need that next. I just need that one piece of something, and it's gonna be great. And then E is an emotional.
mm.
We're just in this emotional roller coaster of exhausted, energized. I'm frustrated, I'm stressed. So that's what fine I see in our world today, that people are just frustrated, ignorant, needy, and emotional.
And they'll
I
tell
don't
you
want
to
that for
find.
them.
No, and I have a good friend, Dr. Ken Ford, down at the Institute of Human and Machine Cognition. And Ken talks about the fact that when you go to the doctor and you get your blood work done and it comes back with reference values, he's like, those reference values are for Homer Simpson. Homer Simpson is average. Nobody wants to be Homer Simpson is fine, as you've just described
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
And yeah, there's a huge upside, and there is a huge cost to society for the way we're doing this. And we've got to listen, if you want to make America healthy again, start to deal with these issues and quit fucking worrying about red Skittles. Start paying attention to, can we get real food in people's mouths? And do
Yeah.
they have the revenue? Do they have the ability to just eat real food?
Yeah, gosh, it's gonna take a while.
It's a lot of work.
Yeah. Well, we are doing our part, educating, and we want our listeners to be part of it. So let us know if you are curious about anything, comment on our videos, subscribe, like, share with somebody who's dealing with anything we just talked about in terms of electrolytes, dehydration, hydration, all that. And we look forward to seeing you next week.
Thank you for listening. We truly appreciate it. We'll talk to you next week.
Talk to you next week.